But I also have the pleasure of introducing the sponsor for our session from Prudential, Alelia Hall-Thompson, Retirement Strategies Benefits Senior Associate. Alelia, if you'd like to come on up.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Before we dive into today's session, I want to take a moment to share a bit about Prudential and what makes us so unique. Prudential is more than just a financial services company. We are deeply committed to the communities that we serve. For over 150 years, we've been dedicated not only to providing financial security, but also empowering people through financial literacy programs. Our efforts to educate and uplift communities reflects our belief that everyone deserves access to tools and knowledge needed for a secure future. We take pride in our local presence, whether in Newark, where our headquarters have been has stood for generations, or in places like Dresher and Scranton. Our commitment to these communities is unwavering as we continue to foster growth and opportunity. It's this dedication to purpose, community, and ethical practices that truly sets us apart. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Her name is Micheline Orlowsky, and she's the program director for the Master's and Dietetic Internship program, and is the assistant professor of practice at Marywood University. Orlowsky is active within the dietetics community and is currently serving as the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Chair, and is the past president for Pennsylvania Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, PAN, and the Northeast District of PAN. Orlowsky received a bachelor's and a master's degree and is currently pursuing her PhD at Marywood University. She's a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and graduated from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Leadership Institute class of 2022. Welcome, Micheline Orlowsky.
Thank you so much. Hello, thank you, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Cool, awesome. Thank you so much for being here and attending my session. I really do appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so following the leader, right? You're like, this is a leadership conference. This is a leadership track. Why are we talking about followers? We are going to talk all about followers and why they're important to the structure and movement of an organization. So you just heard my lovely introduction, but you know, why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, my PhD is actually going to be in strategic leadership and administrative studies, and this is actually something that came out in some of the research that I was doing, and I was like, how cool would it to just share this with, you know, awesome, amazing women in this area? So I'm very excited to share this with you. I'm not going to read the objectives because you all can read those, and hopefully you read through them. Okay, so let's get into the meat and potatoes. I'm a dietitian, so I like food puns, if you couldn't tell already. Okay, so defining followership. So followership is basically the process of where individuals or a group of individuals accept the influence of others to accomplish a common goal. So that influence is coming from leaders, but followers play a huge part in, you know, the movement of an organization and also how leaders function as well. You know, ultimately, the goal of the organization comes first, but what kind of gets in the way could be ego, could be unclear vision, lack of passion, and that can come from both ends, and we'll talk through that. So, defining the theory of followership, it comprises of characteristics, so personality traits, behaviors, and processes of going through leadership or policies and procedures of an organization, of individuals acting in relation to their leaders, okay? So this is more so actually a relation-based process rather than a role-based, but there is that role concept of, okay, there's this top person that's, you know, overseeing and overarching all of these other people that are kind of on the lower end of, responsibilities and roles, but they're doing the work, right? They're all having specific tasks to work on. But it also depends on how each of those people interacts with that top hierarchy, sorry, I can't talk, at the beginning or at the top of that pyramid, I guess. So, with that said, it is role-based and relation-based. So, leaders can, basically be they might have some certain characteristics that may be very favorable to leadership and followership, but they also may have some undesirable characteristics. And I'm sure throughout this presentation you might be thinking of specific people because we've all been leaders and we've all been followers at some point in our lives probably. So with that, again, the relation-based is more those interpersonal behaviors, which we're going to kind of talk a little bit more rather than the role-based because that's kind of obvious. And then throughout this presentation, I have some nice little quotes that kind of help sum up each section. So they're kind of like little marking posts, if you will. So this one says, followership is a discipline of supporting leaders and helping them to lead well. It is not submission, but the wise and good care of the leaders, done out of a sense of gratitude for their willingness to take on the responsibilities of leadership and sense of hope and faith in their abilities and potential. So, moving into that, there's 3 typologies that we're going to talk through, and there's a lot of overlap between these 3 typologies, but they're going to describe specific personality types or followers within the organization and what they might exhibit. And then if you would like, if you're on the Whova app, I do have some polls in there. I saw some of you already starting to fill those in, but we're going to do a little game show at the end of this part. So if you haven't pulled that out, I won't get mad. You can pull out your phone now if you want to. So the first typology is going to be Kelly typology. And you'll see this is like broken down in a quadrant form, and then there's a middle person. So we're going to start with the alienated followers. These are the people that tend to rock the boat. Again, you're probably thinking of people. They're going to be somebody that is going to be very challenging. They're going to question a lot. They are very active in their roles, but they are very independent. They think critically. So these are the people that you might think, oop, in a meeting, you're probably thinking, oop, they're making a little bit of a change, or oop, they're challenging leadership a little bit, but they may be almost even abrasive if you think of it, okay? The next one is our passive follower, so we're gonna move down. So our passive follower is going to be the person that's kind of like the yes person. They don't really challenge anything. They do just enough to get by, but they're not really challenging anything. They don't challenge the leader. They don't really ask questions. And they will probably say yes to most things. Sometimes they won't even make, decisions right away, which will bring us into that middle one. But we'll talk about that one in a second. So then we have our conformist. So that is going to be someone who is very active, but they are very dependent on leadership and making those decisions. So they might have amazing ideas in the back of their head, but they're afraid to speak up, or they're afraid to talk through them because they don't want to be more of an alienated follower. They're afraid of not being included or potentially rocking the boat too much. But they have great ideas, but they're just going to say, you know what, I'll take the back seat on this. I'm not going to speak up. Then our pragmatist, so those are the fence sitters, right? That's why they're in the middle of the quadrant, because they don't really take a stance on anything. They won't take a stance on anything. So if you ever see somebody who's not speaking up in a meeting, or they're afraid to voice their opinion, they won't make any sort of commentary or question anything until they are basically called out on it, right? They're not going to make any sort of stance because they don't want to challenge either a leader or also risk being not part of the other followers. Okay? And then the last is our exemplary followers, right? They're the ones that you've had trust with maybe a leader. They're going to question things, but in a critical way, but also, from a caring way. Like they care about the leaders, they care about the organization, but they're not afraid to speak up. There's trust built between all of the components of the organization. So they're the ones that are basically the stars of the group, okay? Which is what all of us followers want to be, right? I would hope. Okay. this other typology, again, there's going to be some overlap here, but this is the Chalif typology. Sorry, I got loud very quickly. And you'll see kind of there's this common purpose that can either bring people together or pull them apart. So again, this is kind of broken down in a quadrant for high challenge and low support, or low challenge, low support, or high support and high challenge. So you're going to see some matching up with the Kelly typology that we just talked about. So the individualist, can we guess what that is? The alienated person, right? It's the person that is going to be high challenge and low support. So they're not going to necessarily be fully on board with everybody's ideas. They're going to be thinking outside the box. They might even be a little bit self-serving, right? They might want to challenge things because they have their own agenda in the back of their head, okay? On the bottom there is resource. That's the person that is low challenge, low support. They're, again, just doing stuff to get done. They'll get stuff done. They're doing the job, but don't expect them to kind of step out of the box, take on extra tasks. They're just doing what they need to do. Then we have the implementer, who is the person that is high support. So they will definitely, take a lead on things. They will be supportive. They will ask questions. They will be highly engaged, but they are not going to challenge a lot. They're going to kind of just stay with the status quo. And then there's the partner. So they're high challenge and high support. So again, they're kind of that exemplary follower where they're okay to, speak up for the rest of the group. They're the ones that are going to work on tasks and move the organization forward and have a good relationship with both the rest of the followers and the leader. Okay, last typology for the day. There is a quiz after this. I'm just kidding, there's not. So we have this is kind of like our spectrum, right? So there's low engagement and high engagement and where they fall in that spectrum. So our isolates are just not engaged. They're detached. These are the kind of people you'll think of when, you're going out to vote and they say, oh, I just don't vote because my opinion doesn't matter. So they're not engaged. But really, that is actually an action, right? We've heard that by saying nothing, you're saying everything. Those are those people, because if there's no engagement at all, we're not contributing any sort of ideas, any sort of movement to the organization. The next is bystanders. Again, those are their kind of like, they don't want to rock the boat. The sheep, if you want. I saw somebody post that in our word cloud of what you think of followership. Sometimes followers think of, these are the people that are just going to stand by and just watch. So that would be your bystander. Your participants are engaged. They're going to, participate. They're going to do things. And overall, they're not really going to challenge. They're not going to be super diehard. They may be looking for, some jobs or other opportunities, things like that. Our activists are the ones that feel strongly and act accordingly with what they think may be right, but also with what the leader may think is right or with what the other followers want. And they are the change makers of this spectrum of people, okay? And then there's the diehards. They are deeply devoted to the organization, but they're actually, you would think, oh, you want someone to be super into it and just like, I will do anything for this organization, this company, whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is, if they're willing to go that hard for something, they may not want to challenge anything or they may not want to speak up, but they also might have their own agenda or the way that they think that things should work when they really don't have a concept of how things are or what should be done. So again, you don't want to be fully like, yes, I will do anything for this, because you want to have that skepticism a little bit. Okay, so do we all have our polls ready? Okay, cool. So I will read through this just in case if you have a hard time reading. It is in your handouts as well, so you can look through that. So we're going to vote, and I do have my phone up here, so I can check to see if you guys got it right. And if you don't have the app, that's okay. You can yell it out, whatever works for you, okay? So, Daniel has been with the organization for 3 years. He started out as a promising hire, but began to become frustrated with his manager. Daniel started to question his manager about the new process of submitting budget requests. Daniel felt that he had an easier and more effective process to submit budget requests. His manager did not agree to Daniel's methods, and Daniel continued to complete budget requests with his method, thinking he would change his manager's mind. Okay, so what are we thinking he is? I'll give you guys like 20 seconds because I don't have that much time today. I wish I had the Jeopardy theme song or something going, or like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? All right. We've got 3 responses, and I think those 3 might have been from someone who was like, had quick fingers. They just kept going with the polls, and they were just like, I'm just gonna pick somebody. So if you're not participating in the poll, what do you guys think? Yell it out. Is he an alienated? Is he a passive? Is he a pragmatist? Is he, what was the other one? Oh, exemplary. What do we think? If you said alienated, you are correct. Hit the wrong one. There you go. Alienated. Good job. Yeah, it's not in your handouts. You can't cheat. I made that on purpose. Okay. Next one. Alicia has been with the organization for 7 years. She is very introverted and often does not speak up at meetings. She often listens and observes, but does not make any proposals or express any interest in contributing to discussion unless she is specifically asked. Recently in a department meeting, the team was discussing the next steps of the program assessment. Almost everyone in the room agreed that they needed to start to evaluate the program. Alicia felt like they should implement the program 1 more month before evaluating, but ultimately she stayed quiet and agreed to facilitate the evaluation. So, is she an alienated, exemplary, pragmatist, passive, or conformist? Here in passive. Passive. She's actually a pragmatist. She's fence sitting. She's not making any, she's not speaking up, she's not saying anything. She has a little bit of an idea, but she doesn't have a very specific idea of what to do. So she's gonna be more on the passive side, but very much on the cusp of pragmatist as well. Or passive, I'm sorry. All right, next one. Cecilia has been with the company for 10 years. She's very personable and likes to make sure everyone is included in organizational matters within the company. However, Cecilia is often seen with her manager. She is constantly asking for help with decisions and needs help with projects. Her managers often need to provide her a priority list to make sure she stays on top of her tasks. So what kind of follower is Cecilia? Is she a alienated, exemplary, pragmatist, passive, or conformist? Passive? Good job. A+. I'm clearly a professor. I'm like, you did great. You get a sticker. You don't get a sticker, I'm sorry. Okay, next one. Brandon is new to the organization. He is young but ambitious, and he wants to fit in with his older coworkers and earn their respect. He always volunteers to help with projects despite having enough on his to-do list. And recently in a meeting, Brandon was not agreeable to the new marketing campaign and thought it might be out of touch. However, instead of speaking up, he opted to agree to the proposal since he did not want to upset anyone. I think I heard conformist. Yeah, I'm moving quick because I don't have that much time. But yeah, he's a conformist. And that's okay. Maybe he'll get up to that point. He's still young in his career, right? He might be one of those people that is going to end up being exemplary, but just not at this time, okay? So there's always room to grow. Again, it might depend on where you are, what your role is, and what organization you work for. You might be very passive in one role, but then you move into a different part of your organization, or you move to a different organization, and you might change how you feel about that, okay? All right, last one. Selena is a motivated and dedicated part of the company. She has been with the organization for 5 years and has been instrumental in the organization's goal to increase donations by 20%. She also engages others in discussion during meetings. And recently, Selena felt that her manager could be benefiting from meeting with the staff on a weekly basis and communicated this to the manager. The manager was grateful for her feedback and encouraged her to give more feedback. Exemplary. Good job, everybody. Awesome. Cool. So we have a good understanding of what the different types of followers are. Maybe even when you were thinking of this, you thought of somebody that you work with already, or maybe you thought of you, and that's okay. There is a followership questionnaire assessment with your handouts. I don't think we're going to get to do that today, but you are welcome to do that. If you did complete it already, there is a poll saying what your results were. And again, no judgment on what you are. It's totally fine. You can grow, you can change, you can do all the different things, and hopefully we'll get into how we can make those changes if you'd like to. So, finishing up this section, the world is moved not only by the mighty shoves of heroes, but also the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. So don't forget your followers. If you are in a leadership position, which I'm assuming most of you are if you're attending this track, don't forget about your followers, okay? They are the ones that are doing the hard work. They're kind of doing the dirty work sometimes. So you should, potentially appreciate them, make sure that they feel heard and seen and included. Okay, so looking at typical leadership research and leadership theories, right? It's always about how the leader affects everything below. It puts a lot of pressure and blame on a leader to the success of an organization and how their personality traits, how their ability to build rapport and work with others can effectively either make an organization go really well or not so well. So their characteristics and behaviors can affect the outcomes of an organization. So this followership topic reverses the lens. So that's what I want you to think. So I want you to think of how followers actually help contribute to the outcomes of an organization by working with a leader and what that can look like. So maybe it's their characteristics and their behaviors. So again, it could be personality traits, it can be how they work, and then how that affects leadership behavior, and then how that can affect the outcomes. So there's favorable and non-favorable characteristics. So we're going to talk about that. So these are the 8 C's of favorable characteristics for followers, okay? So these are going to be traits that you want in a follower. Usually they're competent and credible, right? They're ethical, they're building their skills, they want to learn, they want to engage. They're going to be a champion for the organization. So they're going to be people who are going to, not talk poorly about the organization, despite of whatever's going on. They're going to want to see it succeed. They're going to contribute their ideas and what they would like to see in the future of an organization or how they would like things done. They are committed, so they're not potentially thinking about leaving, or they're committed to whatever mission is happening. So, even if it's a service organization, they're committed to whatever the mission is. They have courage, so they are going to have the courage to pursue different endeavors or give out ideas or, challenge something that they might not think is right. So they have that kind of ethical dilemma of, should I challenge something or should I not? And they usually will. And they are going to have the control to be engaged, but they're not just going to kind of fly off the handle. They're going to be thinking about things critically. And again, they are going to be able to challenge things with their leaders. So, as I've mentioned in this presentation so far, followers, they get the job done, right? They're the ones doing the work. So it's important to keep them engaged and informed. I'm a huge person that advocates for transparency, so I think that's a super important part when you're engaging followers. Followers work in the best interest of the organization's mission. Followers will challenge leaders. They will support the leader as well, so they're not like talking poorly about the leader, to all the other followers and making this this toxic work environment, because again, they can have those effects on an organization just as much as a leader can. We often think of toxic leadership, it's coming from the top down, which it actually can be coming from the bottom up, essentially. And they also learn from their leaders. So maybe they started out as a follower, but they're looking forward to maybe becoming a leader in the future. Or they, will take in different ideas and bring them to other organizations or other ideas to other, projects that they're doing. So they are constantly learning and growing within their organization. Okay, so dysfunctional leadership. Now, this is probably something that's growing as like more of a topic that, we hear a lot about dysfunctional leaders and how that creates toxic work environments, bullying, all of these, very not so fun things but they happen, right? I'm sure you've all at least experienced this once in your life. Hopefully you got out of that situation. But usually there is this dark triad of a toxic leader, right? They're maybe a narcissist, they might be a little psychopathy, and they might even exhibit Machiavellianism, right? So they might have like this dark, like their ego is super in it, they don't really care, they just want the title, they're just moving up, they're not really caring about what their followers, or maybe they're just more self-serving. And followers can really feed into that, right? Now, hopefully that isn't the case, but it does happen. So this is how it happens, right? We have these needs as followers. And even if you're a leader, you probably do have to report to somebody. So you might be a follower at some point, and maybe you're in the middle. So again, you can contribute to this leadership kind of relationship. So we do have this need for reassuring authority figures. This goes back to our childhood days. Again, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist, but I think we all know that kind of is the root of our approval, right? We seek for validation from authority figures. We want to make sure that they see us and that they're listening to us and that we're doing a good job. So if we're not, we can kind of maybe butter them up a little bit. We might, buddy up to them a little bit more because we're looking for that validation. We want security and certainty. So we want to make sure that our job is secure, that we have a future, that we're not, being pushed out of our job, right? So if we start to feel that, we might jump ship, or we're just gonna keep agreeing and try and make sure that we prove our worth, which can kind of feed into maybe not so great things happening. We need to feel chosen or special. So again, we all like to be liked, we all like to be included, we all want to feel like we're, the number one or the right-hand man, the person that the leader can go to always. And we can't always do that because sometimes we do have to challenge leaders. And again, that inclusion piece comes to, we want to be in a community, we want to be accepted. We don't want to be ostracized. We want to be part of the in crowd. We don't want to, be isolated or even fear social death. So being ostracized can really force somebody into some crazy scenarios. They might do things that wouldn't be necessarily characteristic of their normal behavior. But if they're starting to feel like that, they might, kind of get a little anxious and do things that might not be favorable to a leadership position or, to the organization. And then we often feel like we don't have power. So we feel like they're not going to listen to me. I can't challenge them. They might retaliate against me, which hopefully they don't. But that fear, fear is a big motivator, right? So that fear inhibits us from ever speaking up about anything. So what can we do about that? Our key takeaways here are engaging in followership can really move an organization forward, or it can really inhibit its growth, right? Followers are just as important, if not more important, because there's usually more followers than leaders. And think about what happened in the past, year or so, or in COVID, all of these top people were getting eliminated, but the followers still needed to work. So who's really job secure? It's probably the followers, right? So they have a huge influence on whatever project or whatever organization you're in. They basically do accept or reject whatever influence is happening from the top down, and they can, like I said, challenge it or potentially, just accept it, and, the fate of the organization is in their hands. So, this is another quote. If I had to reduce the responsibilities of a good follower to a single rule, it would be to speak the truth. So if anything you've left here today is don't be afraid to speak up. Obviously, there's ways to do that in a respectful manner. You're not just gonna be like, what you're doing is stupid. I don't wanna do that. Or, this is dumb. This is not what we should be doing. We should be doing something else. There's this respectful conversation to be had with a leader about if you have any concerns or questions or challenges. And who knows, you may not be right, but they at least could potentially be transparent enough to explain it to you, and then you learn. Okay, so I mentioned the assessment. Again, we are not going to get to that today, but you are welcome to do that on your own time. If you loved those quizzes in the backs of magazines, that's like another quiz for you. But it is not, it is the men behind, whoa, I can't talk. It is the men behind who make the man ahead. So again, followers have that influence. They do have a role to be played. So don't discredit them. Don't not include them if you are a leader. Okay, so let's see. It's 10:33. I'm actually doing pretty good on time. There is a case study. I think it's in your handouts. We can do it very quickly. We might not get to all the questions, but at least it'll kind of help reinforce and do something a little bit more activity rather than just me talking at you the whole time. Sound good? All right, cool. And if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box, and hopefully we can get to them. So I don't have the case study on these slides just because it's so long. But if you look at it, it is talking about basically golden hour care is the case study. That's the top. Does everybody have that or not? It's okay if you don't. So I do have it. I can read it out loud if you don't have it. And feel free to take notes. So Rachel Marks started Golden Hour Care, an in-home health care agency 20 years ago with a staff of 2 and 5 clients. The agency has grown to a staff of 25 serving 50 clients. Rachel started in elder care as an aide at a reputable assisted living facility. She liked caring for patients and was good at it. When she began running Golden Hour Care, Rachel knew all of her staff members and her clients. But as the demand for in-home health care has increased, Golden Hour has grown as well. She ended up hiring more staff and expanded her service area. And she admits she feels as if she is losing her connections with her clients and staff. And when asked to describe a time when the agency was really running smoothly, she said that she had just about 10 employees. And this was good for us. Everyone did what they were assigned and did not complain. No one called in sick. They were very dependable. But it was different because we all lived in the same area and I would see our employees every week. I'm going to try and shorten this up a little bit. Because the agency's service area is now much larger, it encompasses many of the city's suburbs, and Rachel seldom sees her employees. Timesheets are emailed and paychecks are sent through the mail or directly deposited. Because they never see us, the staff feels like they can do whatever they want, and management has nothing to say about it. It's not the same when we were smaller. There's a core agency staff that Rachel does interact with nearly every day. Teresa is a staff member who has been with Rachel since the beginning and is Rachel's go-to person. I trust her, Rachel says, when she says, "Rachel, we need to do it this way." I do what she says and she's always right. Teresa is very positive and promotive of the agency and complimentary of Rachel when other staff members challenge the rules or procedures of the agency. Teresa is the person to whom Rachel goes for advice. And Teresa always challenges Rachel to make Golden Hour Care the best agency it can be. Teresa is a direct contrast to Bethany, another employee. A 5-year staff member, Bethany is dogmatic and doesn't like change, yet frequently challenges Rachel and the rule of the agency. Rachel describes Bethany as a bully and not a team player. For example, Bethany and Rachel had a conflict about a rule in the agency's procedural manual and that requires staff to work every other weekend. Bethany argued that it was unfair to force staff members to work every other weekend and that similar agencies don't have such policies. To prove her point, Bethany obtained a competing agency's manual that supported her position and showed it to Rachel. Rachel, who does not like confrontation, was frustrated by Bethany's aggressive conflict style, and Rachel brought up the issue about weekends with Teresa, and Teresa supported her and the way the policy was written. In the end, Bethany did not get the policy changed, but both Bethany and Rachel are sure there will be more conflicts to come. 2 other key staff members are Rachel's son, Carter, who hires and trains most of the employees, and her son-in-law, Jason, who answers the phones and does scheduling. Rachel says, as a manager, Jason does his work in a quiet, respectful manner and seldom causes problems. In addition to handling all the hiring and training, Rachel relies on Carter to troubleshoot issues regarding client services. For both Jason and Carter, the job can become stressful because it's their phones that ring when the staff member doesn't show up for a client's work, and they have to find someone to fill in. Carter also says he is working hard to instill a sense of cohesiveness among the agency's extensive staff and to reduce turnover with their millennial-age staff. Carter says while the agency's growth is seen as positive, he worries that the caring philosophy his mother started the agency with is becoming lost. Oh no. So, what do you think about golden hour care? Do you think they're headed in the right direction? I see some heads saying no. There are poll questions here. Who are the followers? Probably Bethany, Teresa, Carter, and Jason, right? So let's talk about Chalif's typology. So that was, I believe, the individualist, I'll go back to my notes here. I get those three. They're all C's and K's, which is kind of funny. Chalif's typology is individualist, partner, resource, and implementer. So what's Bethany? What do you think she is? I heard somebody say something. Alienated? Yeah, so she's an individualist, too, for that Chalif one. So I'm skipping to two different typologies. Good job. Okay. What is Jason? I heard resource. I'm going to say he is actually going to be, oh yeah, he is a resource. I'm sorry. I was flipping them. Yep. Carter is an implementer. Yeah, he takes on a little bit more responsibilities. He has a little bit more challenge to him. He's a little more engaged. Good. Okay, so Teresa is partner, right? Good. So with that, do you think they're headed in the right direction? Do you think there can be anything done to change this? Or are they just doomed? They're going to close. So if you were somebody that was hired to come in and help them, what would you do? What would you say to Rachel? Yeah, I agree. Let's go ahead. Yeah. You probably, it seems like Teresa and Rachel meet a lot, but maybe it can be worth it to meet with Bethany and Jason and Carter, and maybe if there's a couple other people that are in like satellite locations, like meet with them pretty regularly. Because I think when you're more hands-off, right, it can potentially, you lose that communication, you lose that rapport. And then your followers don't feel like they're heard, so they're not as engaged. They feel like, again, they can do whatever they want. So if they know that they have some accountability, that can help move things forward. So good job. Perfect. All right, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to move forward. So overall, I hope you took something out of this presentation. I will be here if you'd like to, connect, would be happy to do so. I just want to fill in the rest of this with this last quote, which is, "He who cannot be a good leader cannot be a good follower, cannot be a good leader." So usually good leaders have at least been very knowledgeable of what has gone on in a follower's shoes. So even taking that perception and putting yourself in those other person's shoes and learning from their perspective can make a whole lot of a difference. That's my main reference, and if you have questions, happy to answer them. And you can find me on social media, you can email me, Happy to connect today. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.